Welcome to the QBC podcast, where we explore new paradigms in health and science that have a meaningful impact on our day to day lives. I'm your host, Meredith Oak, a curious coach and mom. I started a journey to overcome chronic fatigue and found myself in a whole new quantum universe. I believe new research shouldn't stay locked away in an ivory tower, and that wisdom can be found in many places and understood by all of us. To keep in touch with this podcast, the QBC free community, our episode guide, and all the show notes, please visit qbcpod.com, qbcpod.com. Let's get together to create the future we want to live in. Hey. At the time of this streaming, we are in full-blown registration mode over at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, which is a partner organization to the QBC. And the QBC podcast. It is a foundation focused on education and soon to be announced other activities. We've got lots coming up in 2025, which we'll be sharing with you over the course of the year. But right now we are open for the registration for practitioners who would like to add the quantum biologic perspective to their practice. It covers the basics of the science and how to expand your practice by integrating the quantum biologic view. And specifically, we focus a lot on light and sunlight as well in the course. But the principles apply out to any kind of frequency, from thought to sound to all of the things. It's a really beautiful science that explains the mechanism underneath energy medicine and brings, I think, the medical model of biology into the new paradigm for the new world that we are moving into. It is not business as usual anymore, folks. Like we're out on the bleeding edge, which is sometimes a lonely place, but always very exciting. And everyone's going to catch up, and it's going to be soon. The shifts are coming. They're coming fast and furiously. And this is a very invigorating time to be alive, shall we say. Okay, so if you want to jump in and be in community and have structure and guidance and colleagues and peer support around the topics that we talk about and around quantum biology, and you want to apply it professionally, please do go to, you can go to qbcpod.com and go to the certification section and fill out the application. I'll also put it in the show notes. We'll add you to the waitlist. It's going to be super fun. I just hear every day from people who are like, this changed my life. I don't like to oversell things. It's not my style. I don't like to be like, this is the best thing you'll ever do. And then people are like, no, it wasn't. But it's really good and people really like it. So I'll just say that. We'd love to have you join us. If you feel called, please follow that calling. Okay. So today I am very excited. This is a great episode. We have a lot of new listeners, and I would like to welcome you. And I would like you, if you don't have the podcast guide, I invite you to get it, because there are certain episodes. I was talking to someone. She's like, I just started listening to your podcast, and you were talking to that guy, David Schmidt, about like light codes in lobster blood. I'm like, what? So I said, okay, maybe get the podcast guide and go through and just pick the topics that you would like to learn about and kind of work up to some of the crazier stuff that we cover. So if you're new, please go do that. But also if you're new, this is a great episode. I am talking today to Mollie Eastman. Mollie studied all of the things, learned all of the science. She's really good at communicating it. Her entire focus is around sleep. So she was an insomniac of the highest order, really bad. And she was just like, there has to be more than what my doctor is telling me. And indeed, there was. So Mollie is the founder of a company called Sleep is a Skill. She also has a podcast called Sleep is a Skill. I love that title because I think it's really empowering. It's putting sleep in our hands and not just leaving it up to the fates and to the pharmaceutical industry to medicate us into unconsciousness. There are things we can do. And Mollie lays it all out. She's organized all of the research she's done around sleep in a very clear and compelling way. The foundational piece of it is circadian timing around everything. So if you are one of my coaching clients, do pay attention to how Mollie has organized all her information. I would say she's a very high level information organizer, which is something I have a lot of respect for, because it makes it easy for people to follow and engage with. So enjoy my chat with Mollie. We had a really fun time and enjoy learning how to build your skill of sleep. And of course, don't forget to visit our friends at bondcharge.com. Put QBC in the code at checkout for a discount, and you can get all the things you need um, to build your sleeping skills that Mollie and I talk about at bondcharge.com. You can get the blue blockers, little red night lights, all of the things. So enjoy my chat with Mollie. I sure did. Mollie Eastman, welcome to the QVC podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I know before we hit record, there's so many things for us to discuss, so this is going to be fun.
Yes, it is going to be fun. And I think this will probably be the first of more if you're up for it.
I would love that.
There's
yes.
lots to unpack. Okay. So, Mollie Eastman, you are the host of the Sleep is a Skill podcast. You have a Sleep is a Skill company that helps people develop that skill. So, let's hear your origin story. Because, like most people, I'm sure you didn't graduate college being like, I'm going to teach people how to sleep.
I most certainly did not at all. I'm as surprised as anyone else that I ended up in this line of work. And it came from really solving my own problems with my sleep. And what that looked like was, as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the max. At one point, I decided to take all that stress on the road and add jet lag into the mix and, variability. And as someone, I know you traveled a lot, travel can really magnify things that aren't working in your life. And when I did that, then I went through this period of insomnia that I had never experienced in my life. And it was so scary. And I went to the doctors in, of all places, this little spot in Croatia, and left with sleeping pills. And not only sleeping pills, but this was kind of a little bit more antiquated approach, left with Valium there.
Oh, wow. Old school.
Old school. We're talking old school benzos. Definitely. So if anyone's listening and thinking that this is like standard practice, this is not how it should go. And then ended up jumping around. It was in Budapest and Italy and a couple other places, leaving with things like Xanax, leaving with things like Ambien, and just this whole sea of pills, but no real idea or solution or plan or protocol of how to address this over the long term. And as a quick tangent, this is a big passion point for me. I want people to know, if they are struggling with sleep right now, or know someone who is and is considering, going to a doctor, the gold standard in the United States and the first line treatment is supposed to be CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. In more recent years, things like ACTI, acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia, and other approaches are actually supposed to be what we are given as things to begin with, versus just going down the rabbit hole of medications. So if anyone's listening, that is supposed to be how it goes. And that's not what happened for me. So I found myself then taking these pills. It's not even really helping. And I'm so distraught. I'm still like upset as I'm taking these things. Like, what am I doing? Like panicking. And so I end up going down the rabbit hole to understand, what does it take to get great sleep? Not just from a philosophical inquiry, but because I had a problem. And I'd shared with you before we hit record that I have, close family members who have dealt with different issues with their sleep. And I saw them going down the path of lots of pharmaceuticals and years really, where their lives took a whole different, turn. So the fire was lit for me to figure out how to fix this. So what I discovered really changed the course of my life. And what the biggest thing that I unpacked was this whole world of quantum biology, circadian rhythm entrainment, and realizing that everything I was doing to manage my health and my life was completely upside down. I'd been identified as like a night owl. I had a lot of labels with my sleep. I said, I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's in my genes. I'll sleep when I'm dead. All of these labels, and certainly not serving me in any way, shape, or form, but also keeping me fixed in that way of relating to the world around me. So as I started bringing these things in, and I'll tell you too, this was a big disruption, because I ended up flying back to the United States, went to a bunch of different doctors, also found some physiological things at play. I did have a parasite. I had some other things going on health-wise that certainly weren't helping. But I can tell you that some of the biggest shifts were changing the relationship of these rhythms. And I had been someone that would be going to sleep, into the wee hours in the morning. I would say things like, "Oh, I get my best, most creative work done in the wee hours of the morning." So to turn this all upside down and begin to become this like sunrise loving person was just, I didn't even think it was available to
You're
me.
like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, what exactly? And my husband, so we've been together almost 14 years, and we work with actually a lot of high stakes poker players, especially with sleep, because they are a group that is, in a casino designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm, no windows, lots of blue light, lots of stimulus, lots of excitement. And we were living sort of that poker-esque lifestyle for a long time, very late hours, and it just took a number on my nervous system, my sleep, etc. So discovering that I could really restore this, element of sleep, which, as I shared, wasn't even that great for me before. Like just getting it back to baseline was still incredible, but then getting to get in this conversation of optimization, which I didn't even think was on the table for me, was a whole new world. So it's changed my life so much that I decided to start this company. Sleep is a skill, and I really stand in that no matter who's listening or where you might be at with your sleep, that it is a skill set and that we can transform this. And even if you're listening, you're like, well, my sleep's not that bad. That's fine. We can still up level it. There's absolutely things that we can do for everyone listening, because it's an area of mastery and it's a lifelong kind of process. And even when you think you've got it handled, trust me, rest assured, no pun intended, that something will come along. There's a death in with a loved one, you lose a job, something happens where our
Yeah,
sleep will get challenged in some way, shape, or form. And to have some of these tools in your toolkit is really, really important.
absolutely. It's so interesting to me that you lived a life where you spent time in an environment that was like scientifically designed to
Yes,
short circuit all of our sleep patterns and our sleep rhythms. And now you
absolutely.
live in a world where you can scientifically design the opposite. It's beautiful.
Yes,
It's so
exactly.
funny.
And it's just
Right.
amazing the difference that makes on your biology, your physiology, your psychology. And I want to give people hope too, if they are listening and they don't have the perfect circumstances or what have you, or they're dealing with, their shift workers or wherever the case may be, that I believe those people it's even more important for us to educate on these topics, because you really want to be dialed in on some of your habits and environments, if you got some of those obstacles at play, but also from a place of hope and perspective that if these poker players and people, we work with people in kind of the medical space and what have you, if they can make a difference in those environments, just anyone can.
Yes. And it's, like there's what I'm hearing is like there's so many different tools. And so no matter what the situation is, like there will be something that you can pick up and put into play that will be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's not a single answer. And so many people say, what's the one thing
Mm.
to support your sleep?
It is.
And, one of the things that's been really interesting is we have one of the largest databases of Oura Ring users. So, from a sleep
Oh,
optimization
interesting.
perspective, I should
Okay.
clarify. So we're really on the ground with this granular data to see what does it take to move the needle measurably. And now, of course, these are consumer grade trackers, but we do bring in different sleep data from a more medical grade sleep data as well. But we get to see longitudinally what are some of these things that really make a difference for people. And I get people coming in from all different walks of life. For some people, and some of these basic changes that can make such a difference. So we start bringing in a consistent wake up time. We add the sunlight exposure. We start shifting over their glucose. We do some blood work, and we discover, oh, they've got B12 deficiency or whatever. So we start finding some of those things, and then their whole life has changed. Other groups, it might be so much of the stress and rumination and thought patterns and what have you. So it really is nuanced. And it's often not just one thing. It's often kind of a puzzle where there's going to be a number of things we're going to hit at.
Right. And I love how you frame this sleep as a skill. I think that's brilliant. I think it's a great title because just right there in the title, you're changing sleep from something where it's like, let's see what happens. I don't
Yes.
know. Like, I'll lie down and maybe I'll sleep. Maybe I won't. Maybe it'll be terrible. Maybe it'll be good. Who knows? And it's like, it's so empowering to think of it as a skill set where we can
Yeah.
learn all as many of the variables as possible and then utilize them as needed.
Yeah, and it's such a paradox too, because I don't know about you, but part of the reason I got myself into that problem with insomnia, which to define that is difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Part of the reason I got into that, issue was being a type A personality. Was let me
Yeah.
figure out the protocol, the plan, and it is this sleep is a weird world in that it's this mix of setting the stage and then practicing acceptance and letting go, which can be very hard for the achiever, the type A, what have you. So, but to your point around why I believe with every ounce of my body that it's a skill is that I think an analogy, we had someone on the podcast, I think they were part of Breathe Right, if you've seen that, which trains your breathing. And one of the analogies they used for sleep was as compared to surfing. And so they pointed to great surfers. They'll check the weather, they'll check the conditions, they'll find out where to go to get the right waves. They have all the gear, they've prepared their body, all this knowledge, but then they go out into the water and then they just wait for the waves to come. So what I think and I hope can be empowering for people if they are struggling in some way, shape, or form with their sleep is that a lot of what we're going to do is shift the attention to the days and shift the attention to where we have that power for kind of action and things we can do. And then when the nights come, then that's an opportunity for us to practice some of these skill sets around acceptance, letting go, how can we down regulate, vagal tone, et cetera. And so it's juxtaposition, and it beautifully is illustrated with these rhythms of nature. As diurnal creatures, we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night. And so during that active part, there's tons of things that we can do that help support that we've really set the stage for great sleep later in the evening.
Okay, so let's get into it. Into what those things are. And yeah, the rhythm, obviously, the light cycles and the darkness cycles. And then I really want to circle back to the CBT and the ACT because I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I didn't actually know there was a subset of those
Yeah.
specifically for sleep.
Good. I'm glad you said that because I hear that all the time, and I definitely want people to know that there are these, entire practices in place that have really high efficacy. Some of the numbers for CBTI are up at over an 80% effectiveness rate for people that are dealing with insomnia. So it's insomnia specific, but we can certainly get into all that for sure. I'll say the framework that I use with people is something that is really aligned with this concept of rhythms. And it kind of encapsulates and includes things like our thoughts. So what the paradigm or the way that we have people approach this is kind of a top-down approach. So we begin with timing as a whole, understanding why timing and circadian health and this conversation of quantum biology is so important for the management of our sleep. But we begin with light dark timing, and that also is this anchoring of our sleep wake schedules. So, meaning that people have probably heard of this term, sunlight anchoring. I believe Dan Party out of Stanford was part of kind of coining this. So, anchoring your day with bright light exposure outside, getting your sunlight. And I know this is the podcast for this. Everyone certainly gets this information.
You can never hear it too often.
Right?
You never know who's listening. Talk to
Good.
me about morning sunlight. It's my love
Good.
language.
I know. I was sharing with you before we hit record that I just moved in this new house. I'm so excited about it because it's just like this great indoor, outdoor the way of making it so easy to get that sunlight too is just amazing. But yeah, so getting that morning sunlight and why that's so crucial for sleep, of course, is turning off any of that kind of leftover melatonin, if you will, that might still be present, helping to support that wake promotion. But at the same time, we can, there's ad nauseum. We could spend all day on all the benefits as to why that's going to further support sleep. But the next anchoring thing paired with that is that sleep wake cycle And one of the things that we want, if people get nothing else out of what I'm talking about, I hope it's these two things. It's anchoring with your consistent wake up time, that's 7 days a week, so that you're waking up at about the same time, 7 days a week, and that you're pairing that with that bright light exposure when possible. So hopefully, what people can do is wake up and then go outside and get that bright light exposure together. Those two pairings are going to be really, really powerful to kind of offset some of the things that might be going on with our sleep or stress to kind of bring us back to equilibrium. A lot of people then say, oh, well, you don't care about the bedtime. And of course, we do care about the bedtime. But one of the things we find with sleep is that we don't want to put pressure onto people and say, okay, you got to fall asleep exactly at whatever,
Right.
10 p.m. or
Yes.
something. And so that can really backfire. And also, sleep is really interesting. While people might sometimes go to like this idea of having 8 hours, it turns out that there's not only is it a range 7 to 9 hours for healthy adults, but there is even more variability within there, and depending on age and health and how much you're exerting yourself by day and a number of things. But beyond that, I think what's really important is for people to get that the amount of sleep you're getting varies, and your need for it, like your hunger. So it's often equated to like what is your sleep hunger each night. And so there might be certain times where you aren't that exhausted, and so you actually could stay up a little bit later. But that wake up time is going to keep you more balanced, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
those two things we want to really stick to.
That makes a lot of sense. So just like we're going to feel hungrier if we were out surfing all morning versus
Yes,
reading a book on the couch. There are
exactly.
days where we will be more sleep hungry than others, depending
Nailed it.
on okay.
Exactly. And
Super.
so that's where the wake up time, and so people will say, well, what if I have a really rough night? And so am I supposed to still wake up at around the same time? And the answer is really ideally yes, around the same time. Now, there can be a little bit of variance, of course. So, say you're out and about till really late, or you really stressed out or waking up, we can move that out, right? Say like plus or minus around 30 minutes, something along those lines, maybe max like 45 minutes an hour, but hopefully that's very rare. And we're looking to really keep it super tight. And because what's going to be so valuable there, even though it can sound like really cruel and unusual punishment or something, it's going to help support us keeping that rhythm consistent. And if everything harkens back to the rhythms of nature and how our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have lived, we imagine that they would have been sleeping outside on the ground, or close to the ground, which would have been part of the coolest area in the environment, which brings us to our second piece, which is temperature timing. So that temperature timing piece, we want to keep ourselves nice and cool while we're sleeping, but mirroring those hunter-gatherer kind of ancestors, they would have been out on the ground, and then the sun would have rose, and it's pretty hard to avoid that bright light. Like, you're pretty much going to be getting up at around that
Yeah.
time.
Anyone who's ever been camping is like, all right.
Yeah, and I guess we're up now.
We're up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And that's what's so cool about it, because also, and we think about what happens when the sun appears, suddenly the earth starts getting warmer too. So those are two cues at the same time, so that we're getting bright light and then we're getting a warming of that temperature in the environment. Of course, since most of us are indoors, we're no longer getting either of those changes often. So we're not getting the light piece, and we're also not getting any change with our temperature. So those two things together are really important. So we want to bring those about. And of course, I know I'm skipping to temperature, but with the light dark timing being the first one, we can never jump over the darkness piece. So we really do need those two parts to our day that are unequivocally clear. We want a high amplitude difference, because that can really help with that onset of sufficient melatonin production in the evening. We have certain studies that point to even around 30 minutes in ordinary room lighting, causing around 90% drop in melatonin for certain participants. Lots of different studies, and it does depend on what's the
Right.
brightness of the light.
Right. But say like a standard LED bulb,
Yeah, exactly. And it's surprising
or
because
you've
we're talking
gone
about
the
just
recessed
standard.
lighting in the ceiling. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So it is remarkable how much of a difference it can make. Now, of course, there's variance. I don't want people to like lose their minds if they're exposed to a little bit of light or what have you. But ultimately, we want to do what we can to create that environment, because that can just really help make this more automatic, and the whole slew of effects that happen when our melatonin begins to uptick. when our body temperature goes down in the evening. All of these things just really help set the stage so that you don't have to do too much. Because right now, a lot of people they're getting like these meditations and they're doing like sleepy time teas and yogas and all the things. And those are great. And I'm not saying that those aren't really valuable. But I think there's an opportunity for a lot of this to kind of just get handled when we set the stage. So we got
Right.
our light dark.
Like
we've
our
got
body will just know. We
our
don't
body
need
will
to
just
like
know.
do a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, it's dark, getting dark, sleepy time.
Sleepy time. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think these timing components, they can sound like a lot too, because what we'll go through is light, dark. We talked about the sleep wake, timing there, temperature timing. Then we can look at meal timing, huge one, exercise timing, thought timing, which you and I chatted about a little bit. And then finally, our drug timing or chronopharmacology, the timing of the different types of drugs that we might have, whether supplements, prescriptions, foods or caffeine, alcohol, THC, etc. All of those can play just such a huge role in the body knowing what time it is and what to be doing when. So I'm happy to go through some of those, but I think it's just knowing that if people are listening and saying, I'm exhausted, I don't know what to do about it, like we want to examine all of those tiers and see what might be out of alignment for them.
Perfect. I love those. Okay, so we did the light,
Mm-hmm.
we did the temperature.
Yep.
Okay, let's do food, and I really want to get into. There was another one before. Was there another one before thoughts? Anyway.
Oh yes, exactly. Exercise.
Exercise. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So, meal timing is probably one of both the most clear and kind of understood when we talk about it and break it down, but also I think one of the ones I see more challenging for the average person to implement. And so, what that looks like is we're looking to kind of enact what's known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting, which I think is a more dramatic term because it sounds like when you hear fasting, it sounds so like whatever, but it doesn't have to be. It's more of a digestive break. And it's a very gentle approach too. So it's really just aligned largely with the rhythms of nature. And again, just using our ancestors as our guide, we imagine that for millions of years that it would have been very challenging for us to eat large quantities of food post sunset because we didn't have, pantries, refrigerators, etc. To go off hunting in the middle of the night would be a challenge. So for the most part, maybe you're tethered a little bit to after sunset or something, but oftentimes there's no midnight snacks or any of these ways that we might be managing our food now, not think much of it. So what we're looking to do instead is see, can we keep the majority of our calories and the intake of our food front loaded in our day, and how we can utilize that energy during times when we're active and kind of up regulated. And then when we're down regulated, then we're looking to bring about more of that kind of gentle digestive break, which can facilitate that drop in body temperature we're looking to achieve, that rise in melatonin, because we also see that things like even the turning on of the pancreas seems to inhibit some of the ability to create melatonin in the evening, which is problematic. So we've got all these functions at odds. And if we think about digestion, it's a kind of taxing process on the body. So suddenly you need to pull all of this blood to the stomach and a lot of activity. It's like giving your body homework. And unfortunately, a lot of people are doing this right before bed. And not to point fingers, because I was one of the worst for so many years. I didn't think anything of it. I thought just, it was like my reward for a hard day. Like, let me get whatever, popcorn, all the things, and then gave my whole body this entire set of things to have to handle. And what is that also taking away from? Glymphatic drainage in recent years, we've learned about since 2012, is glymphatic drainage with a G, which is the cleansing of the brain and largely the first half of the night around deep sleep. And so if your body and mind can't focus on some of those kind of heavy hitting tasks that it needs to do, and instead it's being, split into janitorial work, then we're going to actually feel it a lot the next day. And how you'll see that on your wearables is things like a higher resting heart rate, lower HRV, often an uptick in body temperature, uptick in respiratory rate. commonly more wake ups throughout the course of the night. And if you're dealing with things like apneas, so sleep apnea, very common, and an important tangent and point to hit on is that there are over 100 sleep wake disorders that it's really important for people to be aware of, because, I talk to different groups all over and I ask everyone always to raise their hand if they've had a sleep test, and most of the time no one has, and or maybe one or two stragglers or something. And I'm really a stand for a future where all of us are tested routinely for sleep disorders, and because we can do that at home now for a couple $100 and very easily and quickly. But I say all that because meal timing is a big piece of this. And so if you do have existing sleep disorders, especially respiratory based ones, then that can often flare up more issues for you as well. So we have a lot of people wearing continuous glucose monitors to really drive this point home. Because I would say our most popular pain point that people come to us about is wake ups, and they're really frustrated about waking up throughout the course of the night. And often, some of these wake ups where now they're struggling to get back to sleep. And so a really common reason for that can be glucose drops throughout the course of the night, and that crash, right?
I totally noticed that because life is life, and sometimes I eat dinner late because
Of course,
for whatever reason, and
yes.
I always wake up in the middle of the night with like a slightly elevated heart rate.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm like, oh, I've just finished digesting. I have to go back and get real sleep.
Exactly. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And you'll see that too, especially for the wearables that will paint the picture of the arc of your heart rate, your HRV, et cetera. Then often it can be the kind of the backwards of what we want to see. So we'll often see higher heart rate, and it's taking the whole night for it to drop down to its kind of its lowest point, and now you got to wake up. And that's when people feel really zombie-like and they're dragging. So what's really important for us to know is that we can play with this. And for the people that say, well, I'm not hungry at breakfast, like, listen, I was one of those people for sure. I trained myself, and I actually thought it was like a badge of honor. I thought it was like so cool because, I don't need anything until lunch. Turns out that was not serving me. And I see that with a lot of people that just, after decades of managing their lifestyle in that way, it makes sense. Their body is not having those hunger cues, but we can change that the same way with circadian rhythm entrainment. And if anyone's ever dealt with jet lag, you know how, and certainly I know you lived in Hong Kong, like when you go from United States to Hong Kong and you're totally upside down, and suddenly you're, bowel movements are at like weird hours, right? And like, just so
totally not hungry, and then you're starving at a weird time. Yeah.
Exactly. But we also know and trust, and we know that, oh, okay, well, I'll adjust in a few days and it's not that big of a deal. But we don't have that same awareness for some of our day-to-day cues, but we can change that in the same way, just without getting on a plane, in your own day-to-day life. So what we can do is start incrementally kind of pushing things back to front load things. And you can do it gently, the same way you would you wouldn't move your bedtime, wake time aggressively for the most part, 5 hours or something. You would, inch it back. And so we can do something like that with your meal timing too. And what you can anticipate and expect is commonly drops in that heart rate, uptick in HRV, drops in respiratory rate, drops in body temperature, and then commonly richer sleep in the sleep staging. Do know that the sleep staging classifications on the wearables are some of the least accurate pieces of data on the wearables. So they're making their best guess. It's not on the head. And that's really what we do need is brain-based data for sleep staging. But it's continually getting better.
And sleep staging is like how your body's preparing for sleep?
Yeah. So looking at things like your deep sleep, your REM, your light sleep.
Oh, the stages of sleep while you're asleep.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so with those, and because that's another pain point that people come around is they'll say, oh, I'm not getting any deep sleep. I'm not getting enough REM. And so I do get concerned too, because, and I get it, for a long time, we might be looking at these wearable data. But if anyone had, for instance, the Oura Ring for many years and then saw when the change update came and suddenly all your stages look totally different, that can help underscore why we don't want to make major life changes based on especially the sleep staging. But I would say they've gotten better. And and at the same time, some of the other pieces of data, so the HRV, heart rate, respiratory rate, body temperature, Were you asleep or were you awake? Some of those are a little bit more on the higher levels of accuracy. So you can kind of define or discern more things from that. But it all goes back to that meal timing and meal type, of course. You can't step over the meal type because if you're having foods that are spiking and crashing you with your glucose, what is happening by day is often getting mirrored at night. And that has to do with your glucose regulation, but also your nervous system regulation. So if you're in a sympathetic state all day, it's common that we're going to see that at night. So that's really why we're putting the flashlight on the day to see what can we do there to support that the evenings work more routinely. So I would say the most basic takeaway from this meal timing conversation is just inching things back. And we had Dr. Sachin Panda on the podcast, who has a lot of research out of the Salk Institute, a great book, Circadian Code, if people want any more information on the meal timing piece of this.
Yeah.
But he'll speak to, of course, 2 to 3 hours before bed, having last bite of food. I'll say anecdotally from wearable data, and then even a study that's coming out of Whoop, where they found the difference between people having 2 hours before bed, last bite of food, and 4 hours before bed, having last bite of food. It appears that the 4 hour before bed last bite of food group really was had much more favorable results measurably. And then more anecdotal data from our wearables is that we see 4, 5, even sometimes 6 hours or more before bed, yielding some really great and favorable changes for people. So there is bioindividuality, but experiment there.
Right. Yes, I remember when we moved our dinner time earlier after we read Dr. Panda's book, and I was shocked what a difference
You were,
it
right?
made. It was really profound. Like after the light, it was absolutely the biggest change.
Yes.
And we try like once a week. We're usually more in like the 2 to 3 hour window, but often on a Sunday we'll like have our main meal of the day at like 4 p.m. and not eat again.
Yeah, 100%.
And that sleep is so, I don't even have my Oura ring on very often anymore, as I lost it, but
I know,
I could like, it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like the sleep is so pure.
Yes, it really is. Now, for an extreme example, people might have heard of Brian Johnson and all the money he's putting into. Now, he's, I think, terrified of the sun, so I don't know what to say about that.
He looks like...
But what I will say is that one thing that has been of interest is I really appreciate his underscoring of the importance of sleep in this idea of, preserving longevity, if you will, creating an environment for longevity to thrive. And one of the things that he has been gotten a lot of press around is that his last bite of food is around 11 a.m. So
wow.
I'm just saying that, not to say
there's a fasting window.
Yeah, there's a fasting window. Now, I'm not saying at all for people to misconstrue and think that they need to stop eating at 11 a.m. But I'm saying that we might have gotten things wrong for all those decades when it was really in vogue to skip breakfast and push things out.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that maybe this exploring, this front loading could make a lot more sense. And your felt experience is what we see for a lot of people too, the ending in more of kind of that senior citizen timeline or like early bird special. I'm right there with you, by the way.
Yeah. You can't even get a meal in Europe before 7:30 p.m.
Totally. I know. Exactly. Yes. And so if we ever get dinner together, we're definitely getting like a 4 p.m.
I was funny. We were living in France and I went to Florida for like a coaching conference, and we were out walking around at like 4:30 and all the restaurants were filled with, and I was like, oh my gosh.
My people.
Like early eating Mecca.
Yes, exactly. I know. My husband and I, my husband has mild sleep apnea, and so we've been able to get it really down a lot. But he's a stickler too in having food earlier as much as possible. So we'll have like a couple's dinner or whatever. I'll be like, just we're always the ones that are taking the reins for getting or a reservation. We only get 5 o'clock. Sorry.
Rough life. Sorry, what time did you want to meet? We're like 5:30. They're like for cocktails, right? We're like no dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Sitting down, ordering. Yeah, exactly.
We'll have to come to Austin and we can all go out for dinner at 3.
Please. Yes, exactly. Do you know Danny Hamilton too?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so she's a blood sugar expert.
Oh, Danielle. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yes.
Yes. So she's a really close friend. And so we're always doing a super, super early. That she's actually coming over in like an hour after this. And so we'll
Oh,
probably be
great.
eating really, really early.
That's so funny.
So amazing.
I know. I saw a tweet the other day. It was like getting up early, eating dinner at 4, gardening all day. Old people, you had it right all along. I'm sorry.
I feel like I saw that too. Yes,
It did
I
the
cannot
rounds.
agree more. It's this old wisdom, right? And it's
Yeah.
all
It's
coming
like,
back.
of course, like that's the rhythm.
Yes.
All right. So I want to dive into the thought piece before we
Totally.
wrap.
Totally.
Because
Okay.
I find that really interesting. So just from my personal experience, right? Like obviously, we've been on a similar journey.
Yeah.
My sleep is usually really good because I do all the things.
Yes.
But when it's not, it's often because I've had an email or an interaction and that has triggered me in some way. And I'm like, and now my sleep is, now I'm awake
100%.
worrying.
Yeah, and I absolutely want to get that message out for people because, if you're like nodding your head or having some element of I've been there, you're not alone, and we actually have research to support this now. So, in that whole domain of what we talked about, all these timing pieces, and skipping over movement, the big takeaways there is just making sure we're getting as much movement. I shouldn't say as much, but getting some gentle movement and sufficient movement by day, ideally when the sun is out and having a nice alignment there. But then when we get to thoughts, one of the things I've kind of coined it this idea of thought timing on purpose because we have lots of research to support that the types of thoughts we're having at different times throughout the course of the day are very, very different, particularly in the wee hours of the morning. And so one study that we can reference is called The Mind After Midnight. And one of the things they found in that study was that there were very different types of thoughts in those wee hours in the morning, say 2, 3, 4 in the morning, than 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. And what shakes out is some real world consequences. So it seemed to have a bit more of this almost flawed logic, black and white thinking, and sadly, suicidality rates going up in those wee hours in the morning because, and I think many people can relate, where things just look bleaker and right more challenging in those hours of the night. And so I hope that the takeaway can instead be one, if you've ever been there and you're thinking life is just really not working for you in those hours, it's really by design. And that's one of the reasons why we can postulate that there's these problems when people are working outside of the rhythms of nature. So shift workers, for example, having higher depressive rates and all-cause mortality rates going up as they, age and they're working outside of those normal rhythms. A lot of things come up. And if we are creating that for ourselves by going to bed much later consistently, you might be met with some of these kind of symptoms and that thought issues. So a personal, a step that we could take that hopefully could be empowering is one, almost like a personal contract with ourselves. I know this is easier said than done, but to know that if we know that intrinsically this is kind of how things go, that we might not buy in to some of those thoughts as much as we would if we didn't understand this. So if we're thinking the worst case scenario, have that trust that in just a few hours it's going to look very different, and not just like, oh, that's weird, I guess it kind of evened out, buffed out. No, it actually is meant to do that for a whole slew of hormonal shifts and things that happen in the body. So standing in that. And then I would also say another great book that I really love for this conversation and actually it's one of the few books around sleep and rhythms that brings in HRV, is called The Power of the Downstate. And what's really interesting about that is it speaks to exactly what we're talking about, that we really want to create two clear parts of the day, even from a thoughts domain. So an up regulation, so they call it kind of a rev state. So like revving up, like, action taking, you're sending those emails, you're having those difficult conversations, you're dealing with the rude comment on Instagram or whatever, like you're doing all that stuff by day. But then in the down state in the evening, and we can align this with these rhythms of nature. So you can use nature as your guide. So as the sun is starting to set and what have you, then that's where we want to bring in that downstate activity, and that changes the type of thoughts that we're engaging in. and that we kind of create healthy boundaries for ourselves so that we're not going down the paths that could bring about more upregulation when we don't want to be facilitating that. Now, to circle it back to some other entire, areas of psychology that people could explore or have support in if they are really struggling with this, because of course, what are some of the big reasons why people might have sleep issues? Depression, anxiety, other mental health issues, and yet it can be a big question of chicken or the egg. Like, was it what started this? Was it the sleep? Was it the environment? So that's there, but you can explore things like CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, ACTI, acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia, or ACT. And these can all kind of give you tools and protocols that can support you. So, just a personal story, one of the things that really helped me when I was struggling with my insomnia was one of the tools that comes out of ACT, which is that this concept that even if you aren't sleeping, if you're resting, that you're still getting benefits for your body, even if it's not like how you'd perfectly like to have it. And as my type A sort of self, I'm like, well, I should be sleeping. And it's
I'm
right.
supposed to be in deep sleep for another 47 minutes.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And that will that'll get you further and further from sleep. So having some of these ways of thinking and knowing and trusting that you're still getting some benefits from even just kind of calming your body, slowing your breath rate, relaxing, being in a darker room, being in a supine position brings down the heart rate. We know that that can help still facilitate kind of restoration. So that's just one element, but there's entire aspects and things that you can bring in that can help with how you think about what do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night? Do you stay in bed? Do you go out to another room? Do you bring about like deep breathing? Do you read a book? Like all kinds of things so that you have more kind of studied and verified approaches.
Right. So it's really like the way we might learn tools to navigate relationships, to navigate different situations in life. It's like we're learning, there are cognitive tools we can learn
Yes.
to navigate our way to sleep.
Exactly. And I think
Okay.
that it's really important too, because one of the things that frustrates me about the traditional approach in the sleep world right now is people will say, well, just do CBTI and you'll be fine, or get a sleep study and figure out do you have sleep apnea or not.
Right.
And those are the kind of the two levers. And I don't mean to be reductive, but there can be, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
And I think what's beautiful is the work that you're pointing to, that as we bring in all of these domains of quantum biology, circadian rhythm entrainment, that can also help change the physiology of what you're working with, of the type of hormones that you're working with,
Yeah.
of where you're starting like base point, so that it can make things a lot easier, so that you're not ruminating because you have no serotonin and melatonin because you haven't been outside in weeks and like, all these sort
Yes.
of things. But I think it's not to discount too, because those can all be really helpful, especially if you've got trauma in your past or things are happening. People have stuff, and I've been there, and so I think it's important for us to pull from all of these modalities and know that there's a lot available.
Yeah. I really love that, Molly. And to layer it on, like the foundational pieces of, of solid rhythms with light, with darkness, temperature, food. But then, yeah, layering on the psychological and emotional support
Yeah,
that we might need. And it's not one or the other, but they all work together,
they all work
obviously,
together.
in the quantum field.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I'll just say the last one to put a bow on it all is
Yes.
drug timing or chronopharmacology. And this one's really interesting because you can do all these things, but if you're, I don't know, just having pots of coffee late into the night and alcohol and THC and what have you, then that's going to absolutely show up in your sleep. But the empowering thing is that we can kind of shift some of those from a timing perspective, but also an awareness perspective on certain prescription drugs that we might not be aware of that might be impacting our sleep, supplements that could be impacting our sleep both negatively and
Yeah.
positively, depending. So just really taking an audit of the things that are going into our body, the time and the impact that they might be having, because there are times where we might get some whatever blood work or what have you done and be able to see that certain people are dealing with things physiologically and really make a huge difference often, and it can be by removing some of these things that they're taking, which we often can see come into play as well. So at its core, what I hope for people to realize is a couple things. One, if you're struggling with your sleep, that there are people that can support you and that there's so many things you can do. And certainly listen to this podcast for sure. It's a lot of these things are going to, for the average person, can often help take care of itself by doing many of these things. Now, if there are additional things, if you're still struggling, then you can work with people on some of those approaches I mentioned, CBTI, ACTI. And I absolutely believe that everyone, I think, should be tested for sleep disorders because there are over 100 sleep-wake disorders. There's so many people that I've tested where they say, sleep disorder, I don't snore, I'm not overweight, and yet we find out sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, restless leg, all of these different things that they just might have no clue that they're dealing with, and that can make such a difference. And you can see some of those signs on your wearables too. So if you are seeing a lot of restless sleep, if you're seeing difficulty with your heart rate stabilizing, if you're having a lot of wake ups throughout the course of the night, there's just a number of signs that can also point to that we really want to get you tested.
And that would require going to like ordering a sleep study kit. You can't do this with your ordering.
Great question. So as of right now, I anticipate that in the very near future, we're going to see wearables that can also be more diagnostic. But yes, right now we can't do that at the moment. So you can order online for a couple $100 at-home sleep tests, which is super exciting. And those are more geared towards respiratory-based sleep disorders. But there's even a new test that is a little more expensive that you can hook up to your limbs as well. So you can see more information. It's our closest thing to an in-lab study at home. So that's available. So it's kind of like this Venn diagram, like an in-between. And then if there's more severe, more things that we want to get more information on, then you can go in lab. But we can have those tiers where it can just be a couple $100 to test at home. And I mean, that can change the course of your life. Like few things I've seen overnight make such a difference than discovering we have some of those sleep disorders, treating those. And then people, it's like, the sky is brighter, the colors are great. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and that's really good for people to understand that I didn't realize there were so many different types of sleep disorders. I was kind of like, yeah, I have sleep apnea or you don't.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And that's the thing because we also know that so many people are running around undiagnosed, especially with those respiratory-based disorders. And we know that that's going to uptick all kinds of, so certainly all-cause mortality rates go up, cardiovascular issues, our mental health, and so much more.
Amazing. Mollie, this is so good. I feel like we went on like such a journey.
We did go on a journey.
It was amazing. And yeah, thank you for like layering all of these other like super important things. And I also just want to quickly say, like, I had sort of like the inverse of your experience where I was sleeping 10 hours straight and waking up feeling exhausted.
Yes.
So your earlier point about the quality of sleep, that, this is just so key.
So key. And so hypersomnia, so sleeping a lot and kind of unclear the reasons why and not feeling really rested on the other side of that is something else that we want people to be aware of. So I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's a big one too.
Oh, I didn't know it was called that. But yeah, I was just like fatigued all the time and still sleeping a lot and like so demoralizing.
Yes.
Like, do you know how much hard I have to work to set aside 10 whole hours to sleep? That's a lot.
I still not even feel like I
feel like crap.
My money's worth,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Mollie, thank you so much. This was delightful. And people can find you at Sleep is a Skill. Is it sleepisaskill.com?
Exactly. Yes. Sleepisaskill.com. You can do all the things. We have a sleep assessment there. We have a podcast comes out every week with different sleep experts. I think we might be getting you on the podcast too to speak to sleep experiences as well. So, and different maybe for many people, what you're speaking to can land as like a whole new world of things that they can do for their sleep. So, but yeah, the sleep podcast. And then we have a sleep newsletter that goes out every Monday for over 6 years called Sleep Obsessions. So would love to have people over there. And I just want to say that I so appreciate you kind of creating a forum to be able to discuss things like this and underscoring the importance of sleep. because I truly believe that it can just change the course of people's lives. And I really want to protect against people having to go down the path of sleeping pills and pharmaceuticals, and understanding that there's and I'm not making judgments around medical, states or choices, but I want people to know, especially when we talk about those sleeping pills, that things like benzos and Z drugs are really meant for short-term use. And sadly, we see so many people on these for years and decades, and there's a whole other world available.
Yeah, it's really important. And thank you for all your work on this, Mollie. And it was delightful to have you.
Oh, thank you. This was so fun. More to come. We'll have to have our 4:30 p.m. dinners in the near future.
Love it. Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.